This is Unit 3.9, the demographic transition. So demographic transition describes dramatic changes in countries' birth rate and death rates. Transition overall has occurred in only a few countries, the US, Japan, much of Europe. And for our class, there are four stages to the demographic transition that the AP really cares about. So if you're taking other classes like AP Human Geography, then you might have a different demographic transition. Please don't be overly concerned about it, but if you want to ask me about it, you can, but we're only going to look at four stages here. So what you're going to want to do here is make a graph. And on this graph, you're going to plot the crude birth rate, the crude death rate, and population totals for a hypothetical country as it moves through different demographic transitions. If you want to follow along with the graph in the video, you can create a line graph where the birth rates are in green, the death rates are in red, and the population total is in blue. Anytime there's a difference between the death rate and the birth rate, you can shade that in with yellow. And that sort of assumes that the death rate is higher than the birth rate. So beginning with this graph, you'll notice that in the first stage, we'll call this the pre-industrial stage. Both birth rates and death rates are high, and the overall population is low. But then in stage two, you have a transitional stage where death rates decline due to increased food production and improved medical care, but birth rates are still high. And this is considered a transitional stage. And the population starts increasing pretty fast here. So whereas the population is flat in stage one, it increases in stage two quickly. And then in stage three, we have what's considered an industrial stage. Now the death rates are low due to better food and medical care, but as opportunities increase for women, economic opportunities, educational opportunities, and they gain access to birth control, then birth rates start to decline as women have more control over whether or not they have children. And then finally, stage four is the post-industrial stage. Birth and death rates are both low. Population is greater than it has been any of the other stages, but it is also a steady, constant population. So again, here we see some of these details. So in stage one, there's little to no growth, right? The birth rate and the death rates are roughly equal. Obviously, the birth rate has to be a little bit higher or else the country wouldn't exist. This describes the US and Europe before the late 18th century. And there's basically no countries now in stage one. Some have argued that South Sudan might be in stage one, but our general understanding is that no countries are in this stage any longer. There's rapid growth. You can see the population growing rapidly in stage two. Fertility rates are high, but there's better healthcare, access to food and water, and vaccinations. This was the US in the early 19th century, and you might consider India to be like this now. Stage three, the industrial stage, family income goes up and birth numbers decline. There's better education, better economy, and more control or more availability of birth control. And then stable growth, this is considered stage four. Growth is very small, even though the birth rate is still above the death rate. There's a lot of affluence and economic development. And then there's stage five, which is declining growth. Birth rates are less than death rates, but there's affluence, economic development, lots of people who are elderly. And it's possible the government could encourage people to have children to keep the population growing. Another way to look at this graph is to try to match it up with population pyramids, and this is pretty common on the AP test, where high stationary populations might be sort of those J curves that you can see under the stage one population pyramid. Things that are a little more triangular, early expanding, late expanding, where the pre-productive populations are pretty stable. Low stationary is where it's shaped a little more like a curve, but indented differently than the high stationary. And finally, contracting, where the amount of young people is actually less than people who are older, and eventually that will pass through the population. There'll be fewer people. Here's another way you can graph it, and the numbers are all a little bit different. This is primarily for the UK, but the patterns remain the same. Again, low growth, high growth, but then the question here is whether, if green is the growth, then the growth starts to slow down in stage 3 and stage 4. All right, well, that is it for Unit 3.9, demographic transition. Please let me know what questions you have.